Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to today's episode of Her Version, a podcast dedicated to hearing stories of struggle to triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Today, we have an amazing guest speaker with us, Kimberly. Kimberly is a mother of 4 children who works in the world of empaths. Listen in as Kimberly speaks about the importance of setting boundaries, getting yourself out of depression, and knowing when to cut off relationships that fall under the category of narcissism. She was once emotionally sick and now is living a vibrant life full of laughter, authenticity, and contentment. Welcome, Kimberly.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining me. I know you are somewhere else. Where are you?
I'm in Australia.
Australia! I love that. Absolutely. Isn't this crazy that we can talk on video cross country?
Yes, it is.
So cool. So cool. How's your week been?
Yeah, really good, really good. I'm actually outside at the moment because I've got a house full of people asleep, and it's actually not too bad out here. So I figured I wouldn't disturb them and they can sleep and I can do this.
I love that. What time is it?
It is 20 to midnight.
Oh my gosh. Thank you for coming on. So you've had a full day then. Are you in the future? What date is it?
I'm in the future. So it will be the 20th tomorrow, I think.
Wow, very cool. So it's 10 a.m. here. So
yeah.
I'm still drinking my morning smoothie.
So as we talk within the next 20 minutes, I'll be in your day, and then I'll be tomorrow.
Wow, that's so cool. Wow, that's so awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking some time out of your day to
You're very welcome.
or your night to sit down with us and share your story. I'm so excited to kind of unravel your past and your present and your future, and give women hope as far as women who are enduring some of the stuff that you've gone through in your life. I think that it's so important, and there's so many women who are in this cycle and they don't even know they're in it. So I'm so happy to have you on. One of the things that I love to do before we actually kind of jump into all of the awesome things that you have going on in your life at the moment is I kind of like to kind of step back and talk about your early childhood and teen years and kind of, where you were and what type of person you were growing up. Do you mind talking about that a little bit?
Absolutely not. No, that's fine. So my parents divorced when I was 2. My father wasn't that much in my life. I didn't realize until very much later that my mother was responsible for that. But a lot of the emotional abuse I realized I felt was from my sister as a child. She was 4 years older than me, and she was very, I guess, as a child, I would call it bossy and domineering, and we had the normal sibling rivalry, but she was very manipulative, and and I was just, this quiet-natured child. And so, she actually, I used to be frightened of her, and I used to be, we never really had that sister bond, which was very easily broken once we were older. So, thanks to my mother. So even as a child, I grew up, we never went without. I went to a private school and had all that. But what I lacked as a child was I was emotionally neglected. So my mum didn't show much love and affection to me. If I wanted to give her a cuddle, she would just be like stiff as a board, and she wouldn't, wrap her arms around me, and I'd say to her, like, hug me, and she'd be like,
wow.
And so, that really sort of made me become very much a people pleaser. I wanted her to accept me. I wanted to do good, and I wanted her to, I guess, just sort of, tell me how great I was. And, and sometimes she would, but not in the way that I wanted, I guess. But then she had this way of taking that away from me as well. So when I was a teenager, all I wanted to do was be a hairdresser. It was my dream. It was all I wanted to do. And that's what I wanted to pursue. And, so she didn't have any qualms with that. But once I stepped into, I got my apprenticeship, I went for all these job interviews, and, I was 16 by this time. And, back in those days, if you didn't get an apprenticeship at 16, you were pretty much too old as such. And so I actually got an apprenticeship with the most prestigious salon that was in Adelaide at the time. And so I was very, very lucky. And she just seemed to not be happy about it, not very supportive. I guess when I look back now, she was very much jealous of that for whatever reason. I mean, I don't know. So I was very much a go-getter. I was very much, if you told me I couldn't do something, I was like, you know what, I'm doing it. And then, once I went into, being 18 and 19, she very much controlled my life. She didn't like my friends. She didn't like me going out. She didn't like me doing this. She didn't like me doing that. And so at the age of 19, I left home and moved in with my boyfriend at the time, who was 27 with 2 children. He was a really nice guy and treated me well. But I was there for all the wrong reasons. I was there to get away from my mum. I couldn't live at home anymore.
Yeah.
And, so we parted ways because, he was a bit too boring for me. So then I went into a relationship that lasted only 12 months, but that was my first taste of being in a domestic violent relationship with an alcoholic. I was only 21. We just used to go out. He used to just lock me in the house and, just do all these crazy things. I was hairdressing at a salon at the time, and he had a pizza shop. And so he worked at night time. I worked during the day. And so very quickly it was like, when I finished work, I had to go to him. I wasn't allowed to be home on my own. I wasn't allowed to have friends. I wasn't allowed to do that. So I was very confused. I was like, I went from my mum doing that to me to now this. And so, after 12 months, I had the courage to leave. But then I had my first breakdown. I had my first mental breakdown when I was 23.
Wow.
And so I managed after a few months to pull myself out of that and, went back to work. And that was when I jumped into another relationship. And that was a relationship that was to last 7 years. And, I played hard to get. I made, he just wooed me. He wined and dined me. He was, again, 7 years older than me. I was 23. He was 31. He had been married. He had a child. And, and then all of a sudden, within a few months, I was back in this cycle of abuse.
Yeah.
And saw the red flags, ignored them.
Yeah.
I guess it's not that I really ignored them. It's just that I tried harder for him to accept me.
Yep.
I tried harder to please him, and I, thought if I do this, he's going to be nicer to me, and if I do that, he's going to, love me more, and if I look after his child really well, he's going to, but his abuse escalated. He started drinking more. He was physically abusive. He was very emotionally abusive. And, I guess from the time that I met him, like I was 23, he was 31. And he told me that when every day pretty much of our relationship, that when I turned 30, he was going to trade me in for a younger model. And, so it was very, he disarmed me. He just disarmed all part of who I was and, my confidence in who I was. He was always telling me that, I was ugly and fat and this and that. And, and so I guess I became not used to it, but we started a business and, we bought this big house. And before I knew it, I was just like, I'm so stuck. And, how do I get out of this? Is this going to be my life forever with this person?
Yeah.
And then I met my husband. He's now my husband. So he was sort of my way out. I met him in another state. And, looking back, I did used to think, oh, my God, am I jumping, from one bad relationship into another, because I didn't know a bar of him. I just, packed up, moved my stuff to Sydney and moved in with him. And so then I was just like, but by that time I was pretty stuffed up, like I was not in a good place. I was not ready for another relationship. I mean, I look back now, we've been together 21 years and I'm thinking, how did we last? Because, I guess what happened is because I didn't have a break in that relationship, I had a meltdown, and he was very confused because he was ready to move forward. And I went into not mourning the relationship that I just lost, but I grieved, and I was like, oh my God, like I was reliving and thinking and doing all these things that were taking up a lot of the time at the start of our relationship. But within 12 months of us being together, we got engaged, married, and pregnant. So,
could you tell a huge difference between the personalities and the culture within the relationship?
Well, yes, I could. In one aspect, I did. I think one thing I fell in love with my husband is he had a really good relationship with his mum. And when I first met his mum, the first thing he did was walked in and gave her a cuddle and a kiss. And I was just like, oh my God, I love that. Because my two previous relationships did not have a good relationship with their mum. So I did start to learn very quickly that, if they couldn't show love and affection to their mum, then this is why they treated women the way they did. And, and even then I still didn't know what narcissism was. I still didn't understand what had happened to me.
Wow.
It actually wasn't until, all through that time I still had problems with my mum. She was very interfering, very controlling of my relationships. And, as much and all as I tried to assert boundaries, she would just smash them. And it wasn't until, probably I'd been with my husband for about 3 years, and my mother actually had fallen in love with my husband. And that set off a whole new dynamic and series of emotional abuse and neglect on my part, because she didn't care about me. She didn't give time to my children or to my son at the time. In fact, when my mum would babysit, which wasn't very often, she would want my son to call her mum, and she would tell me that she would be a better wife to my husband and mother to my son than I would be. And she really overstepped her boundaries, even with my poor husband. My poor husband, he was an interstate truck driver at the time, and he'd come home and he'd say to me, he goes, your mum rings me all the time, like all day, every day. She's messaging me, what are you doing, where are you going? She asks me more questions than you do, and you're my wife, And so, I guess in a sense I didn't want to realize that was what was actually happening with her. And so I'd make up excuses for her, and until it was just blatantly obvious. And and then it got quite I had my daughter, actually. It was my daughter that made me realize that, like, I needed to cut her off. My mum was doing very psychopathic things. She had convinced my whole family that her and my husband were having an affair and all sorts of stuff. She was getting people to prank call me. She was, getting SIM cards and pretending she was all these different women so that I would think that my husband was cheating on me. And, and she actually really almost sent me crazy. And so, yeah, when my daughter was 6 months old, I used to sit there and stare at her and go like, I don't know how you can treat your child like that. Like, wow. So I completely I sold my house, my husband and I moved, and I completely and utterly cut my whole family out of my life. But then I spent the next 15 years mourning like a death her.
Yeah.
Why wasn't I good enough? What did I do? How could she? And I was so confused. And, that's not what a mother does, like I knew she was a little bit like,
yeah,
screwed up as I got older. And then it wasn't until after I'd completely cut myself off, and then I went into like a real major depression. And then I started to think, no, there's something wrong with her. There's nothing wrong with me. And so that's when I discovered, narcissism. But, back 17 years ago, we had the internet, but we didn't have Facebook and stuff like that. So there was no real support system there. But I learned what was going on and I understood it. But I didn't let it go. I kept questioning her and I'm trying to understand her instead of understanding myself.
Got it. I have a question. Before we kind of dive into, your findings and what, you discovering narcissism, what was going on with your sister? Was your mom just attacking you this whole time, or was it like a back and forth?
Well, it was a back and forth. My sister got married when she was 19 and, she had 2 children and she had a daughter, and my mum was just in love with my niece, absolutely, totally just bestotted by her. And, and as she got older, she would just lavish money and take her on holidays overseas and stuff like this. And, my sister used to say to me, like, oh, I hate it when mum has Taylor because, I'm really worried she's going to brainwash her. And I'd be like, yeah, I'd be worried too, And then, and my mum did some really strange things because my sister and her husband split up. He had an affair, and the woman that he had an affair with and moved out with, my mum went and bought them all stuff for their house. And I was just like, what? So, she had her own dynamics with mum, and we would discuss it at times. We did sort of come together and then go apart and then come together, and but my mum somehow or other would just get in her head, and then all of a sudden, everything that my mother did, my sister would just forget. And I'm not a forgetter. I don't forget. And and then so, all this thing with my husband, she brought my niece into it, she brought my sister into it, and it was just crazy. It was just really crazy. And I just had to. I was like, I'm not bringing up my children in this environment of toxicity, and I had to break the cycle somehow.
Yeah, 100%.
And so, I don't, my sister, works in a hospital that's 20 minutes away from me. And if I need to go to the hospital, like, I panic because I think, oh my God, what am I going to do if I bump into her? I know that she would talk to me like nothing's ever happened, but I can't do that. And to safeguard myself, like, I just can't, I won't allow it to come back in. And I know if I open the door for her, she would, but I won't, because I already know that, what's going to happen.
So she has similar traits to...
I do believe so. Yes, okay. I do. And then it wasn't until, like, I'd cut off from mum and all that then I, had conversations with my dad, and in between all this, I had lost 2 babies. I had lost 2 babies at 2 different times in my 6 months of pregnancy. So I had to go through, labour and all this, and my mum made it all about her. it was just like crazy. And right at the time, as you know, my dad's like asking for a DNA test because he doesn't believe it on his daughter, and and she made all that about her as well. And it wasn't until I had these conversations with my dad, and I was like, like, why didn't you ever like want to see me as a child? And he said, I couldn't. She made it so difficult. And then when I started to understand the pattern of narcissism and her control, and because I grew up thinking that he didn't want to.
Wow.
But I soon learned that he just couldn't. She made it impossible for him.
Got it. When did he decide to finally tell you that? How old were you? Like 20s, 30s?
I was 36.
Wow.
Yeah.
No kidding. So all the way up until 36.
Yeah. I mean, he's, on his fourth wife now and lives somewhere in Australia somewhere. I don't know.
He might be attracting the same type because he probably maybe doesn't know.
Yeah, I don't know.
Huh? That's interesting.
I don't know. I've had to just let go. So I have no emotion where my parents are concerned anymore.
Yeah.
I just don't. Some people say, oh, like, but that's your mom. And I'm like, you don't know what I've been through. You haven't walked in my shoes.
Yeah.
And for me, like I said, I mourned for almost 15 years. I mean, I'm 51 now. And it wasn't until I was 48 that I actually really just let it go.
Wow.
And just went, you know what? I was teaching my kids bad emotional habits. I was teaching them, bad things. So I had to change.
When you first entered the relationship with your now husband, did you deal with ramifications of the previous relationships that you had been in as far as being triggered or
Absolutely.
Can you kind of talk about that just a little bit? Because that's one thing that individuals have to realize is going to happen.
Absolutely. So, my husband would, well, I call him my husband. At the time, he wasn't. But so he would say to me, oh, like, would you like a cup of coffee? And I'd be like, oh, yeah, that's all right. I'll get it. And he'd be like, no, just sit down. And I'd be like, oh, no. And I'd have like this anxiety attack because that was not normal for me.
Yeah.
It was not normal that he could make his own sandwich, get his own food, make his own coffee, and do things like that, or compliment me. Things like that would really trigger me. And then we'd have an argument about it.
Yeah.
We would just literally have a massive argument about it because he'd be like, why won't you let me do these things? And I'd be like, I don't know. Because I was confused. I didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, I did know, but I didn't know, if that makes sense.
100%. 100%. And I think that that's one of the things that individuals need to realize, who are coming out of abusive relationships, is just because you go into a good relationship doesn't mean there's still not going to be arguments because of what you just said. Like the first year or two can be just as volatile because we're making it volatile.
Absolutely. It's and again, it's like mourning. It's like mourning a relationship because you walk around on eggshells for so long that when you're not with them, you see everything in a different light, and you question yourself again, and then you question, and then you feel stupid. How could I do that? How could I let myself be treated that way? And how could I, and I was having this double whammy because, like from my mum, I had all this, so like I was never good enough for her. And then, and I was like, wow, if my mum, this is all I deserve, because if my mum thinks I'm a shit person, then this is why I'm getting treated this way. This is why I'm choosing these people. And and so the triggers were quite, and they're there, they got it, but you just have to, somehow let go. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say that that's what you need to do because I swam for so many years, I mean, even like I said, at the time I'd gone through, 2 traumatic stillbirths. And so I had a lot going on. My first child was with my ex-partner who was an alcoholic, and so he was like, oh, you know, I don't want to have a spastic baby with you, because the child had, I found out during my pregnancy when I was 6 months, that the baby had water on the brain, which is like hydrocephalus. He's like, I don't want to have a spastic child with you, and, you know, and you can just go in a hospital and do it all yourself, and I don't want to borrow it, and, you know. So, you know, I had to deal with that. And then when I met my husband, you know, we had my son, and then in between my son and my daughter, I had to go through it again.
Wow.
But it was a different process.
Yeah, I
a
bet.
much more loving process, you know, like the whole thing was different. You know, the first time with my ex, like, I didn't hold the baby. I didn't want to show him that I was emotionally attached to this pregnancy thing going on that had happened. You know, I didn't want to show him that I was weak.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so then when I had to go through it again, then I felt really guilty because I didn't do what I did with that child, with my husband in that loving environment with my first child. So I went through a lot of guilt.
Wow.
You know, I never held him, and yet I held him, and, you know, they were both boys, and, you know, yeah. And then I had twin girls. So I was given the gift of, you know, my losses, but the opposite sex. So
yeah,
I'm very lucky.
wow. So as far as narcissism goes, you know, you didn't find out about it until you were already married to a kind, loving husband. How did it start to unravel? Why did it even come up? What happened?
Well, it was just her behaviors, and you know, the way she was towards my husband, the things that she was doing. You know, I always had an interest in psychology, being a hairdresser. You know, I had to learn how to, you know, read people, and, you know, doing an old lady's hair, you have to be different to doing a young child's hair or a teenager's hair or, you know, a 20-year-old guy's hair. So you have to adapt to, you know, these different personalities. So I was very into psychology. I was very into, you know, bettering myself. But I just felt that as I went through life, I just got hammered, and I couldn't keep up with, you know, keeping it under control. And so with Mum, it was just, yeah, it actually just got to the point where I was actually really quite, she was becoming very psychopathic, sociopathic, that I became very frightened, which is why I cut off. And then I thought, oh, maybe she's got like bipolar, or maybe she's got like some, you know, schizophrenic or something like that. So then I started to do a bit of research, and I came across, I can't even think how, but I came across daughters of narcissistic mothers. And I was like, And so I started reading people's stories, and I was like, oh my God, this is me. Like, this is textbook. Like, and yet my whole family believed everything my mum said. Like, she could just turn on like, make it sound like, don't be ridiculous, like, as if I would fall in love with your husband, as if I would do that, you know. And so she made me feel like I was the crazy one. So that validated a lot for me. And then I went into but what did I do? I didn't realize that it was, you know, perhaps from her childhood. I didn't realize that it wasn't my fault. That's just who she was. That's how, you know, that's her.
Yeah.
And I couldn't control that. But
Yeah.
I believe that, you know, I was just never good enough because of something I did. You know, so I can relate to narcissism in domestic violence relationships, but I identify so much with, you know, toxic parenting.
Wow.
and how that can, and the symptoms are the same. What you go through are the same. You know, the self-doubt, the self-hatred, self-sabotage. You know, I used to drink and, you know, did drugs and all those sort of things just to numb my mind, you know. I took antidepressants. I went and saw psychiatrists, and nothing worked for me because
Wow.
I believed that I thought I was mentally sick. Like, I thought I had a mental illness. And perhaps, yes, I did in one respect, but I learned that I was emotionally sick. So I had to fix myself emotionally for me to be mentally well.
Yeah. And I'd like for you to kind of, you kind of mentioned that a little bit earlier while we were talking. And I think that is an interesting concept that I've never really heard before. So if you could kind of explain, many times people go into narcissism and they just want to learn as much as they can about narcissism. That's what I did. And you're actually kind of flipping it a little bit. So do you want to explain a little bit how you kind of view it?
Well, I did. I mean, I did the same thing.
Yeah.
I was like, once I was on that road of, oh my God, like all this makes sense now.
Yeah.
Then I had to stop. Then I had to say to myself, like, just stop. So then I went through this mourning process of me not being good enough. And I did that for 15 years until I went, and in that 15 years, I saw psychiatrists, went on antidepressants, all different kinds. One made me fat, so then I was depressed because I was fat. One, I couldn't sleep, so then I was like a zombie. Then one gave me really bad nightmares, so then I wouldn't go to sleep because I didn't like the dreams that I was having. Wow. And so I was just in this vicious cycle, and I was like, nothing's working. I'd go to therapists or psychiatrists, and I'd have my 45-minute time, and they'd want me to relive all this crap. And then say, see you later, I'll see you in 2 weeks. And in that 2 weeks, I had no support.
Wow.
I would walk out feeling worse than what I did before I walked in. Yeah. And I felt no connection with my therapist or psychiatrist. It was very clinical. They hadn't been through what I'd been through. Everything for them was textbook. And so I was just going like crazy, and I was just like, oh, this is just not working. Like, what is wrong with me?
Yeah.
And then I started to learn that I had to stop trying to analyze the narcissism and focus on, okay, what do I need to do? Yeah. How can I let this go? How can I move forward? Because I used to, even, I mean, my son's 20, my daughter's 17, and my twins have just turned 13. So I remember even as, like 5 years ago, we'd take them to the beach and they'd all be sitting there and running around and swimming and having fun. And they'd be like, Mom, come on. I'd be like, no, because I had such despair that I was not allowed to feel joy. I just felt like joy and happiness was not for me.
Wow.
I didn't know what it felt like. Being happy and joyful felt really uncomfortable for me. And so I just figured that that's my life and I don't deserve it. And, it sort of makes me sad now when I think, because and that's what started to make me think like, oh my God, I'm treating, my daughters were having anxiety, and my son grew up all for the first 2-3 years of his life just seeing me cry all the time. And I didn't realize until they were starting to get older that I was like, oh, I'm teaching them really bad emotional habits. This is not good.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I need to stop and then focus on myself and how I can, fix the emotions that and stop. What it was I had to stop believing what had been ingrained in me for so many years by so many people in so many different circumstances, because I was told I was a crappy person. I was, told I wasn't pretty. I was told this and I was told that about myself. And yet the whole time I knew I'm a really nice person. I'm a really good person.
Yeah.
I'm actually really quite, but, I just surrendered it all to them. Mm-hmm. And then I just had to take my power back. And I grew up boundaryless. I had no boundaries with my sister. As a very young age, she would just stomp all over me. I had no boundaries with my mum. I had to abide by her boundaries, but I was not allowed to have my own. If I did, I had an attitude. I was, being rebellious. All these sorts of things. So I grew, and then into, these alcoholic narcissistic relationships. I just had no boundaries. I did not know how to say no. I stopped voicing my opinion. I stopped believing in the values that I had. And that's where when I started to fix myself emotionally, as soon as I learned what boundaries were and how I could implement them, because even my friends were, I'd meet these friends and I'd do everything for them, and they would take advantage of me, and then when I needed help they weren't there, and then I was like, what's going on here? I had no boundaries, absolutely none at all.
Wow.
And so once I learned to establish what boundaries were, and boundaries are not just being able to say no, like they're a lot more complex than we believe, because what are boundaries? What are your boundaries? What are your rules? What are your values? And if you don't know what they are, and most of the time you sort of do know what they are, but you don't set them in concrete. You have to go, right, I am not going to allow people to do this to me anymore. I am not going to, I'd say yes to do something, and I say, I really just don't want to do it. But I said yes, and now I feel shit. But then I didn't want them to not like me because I was always looking for acceptance. And then I soon learned that, having boundaries is actually really empowering.
Yeah.
And that's where, I started to feel good. I was like, I like this, because then I started to get a bit more respect. And then I started to, weed out the people who, if I said no, or no, I'm sorry, I can't do that for you, or blah, 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 or, have a difference of an opinion, and they respected that.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because I've had that before. Exactly. So it's a skill. It's actually a skill. And it's an essential skill for life, that if you don't have it, because you've never been taught it or learnt it, you just don't know. And it's, I've got 3 daughters, and there is no way on earth that I would want them to go through life like I did.
Yeah.
So my 17-year-old daughter, at a very young age, I taught her boundaries. My twins, they're going through primary school. They've got kids that, push them around, and I'm like, nope, say no, don't let them use your pencil, like don't let them take the stuff. And I've watched one of my 13-year-olds actually like grow and learn and go, you know what, like, Mum, it actually feels good to say no, because it'd be like they'd take your ice cream and then you'd sit there and cry because you let them.
Yeah.
Feels good to say, no, you're not having my ice cream, that's mine.
Yes.
And so it was very, very important for me to be able to teach them what boundaries are. And my 17-year-old, like, God love her, like, she doesn't need a boyfriend to validate who she is. She doesn't let people push her around. She doesn't let boys, make her feel bad for anything. She's very, and I'm proud of that, because I needed that. I needed to do that for me, and I needed to do that for them, so that they can, regulate and know how they could be treated, how they should be treated, and their self-respect.
100%. 100%. What are some things that you're teaching your daughters, as far as, or are you? Maybe you're not, but that you could teach us, as far as some red flags during these toxic relationships?
Well, when my oldest daughter started high school, and, she was like right into her horses, and, in grade 7, and then she was going into high school, and I was like, this time next year, you're not going to care, like, you're not going to be interested in your horses. You're going to be interested in boys. Now, here's the first thing. If a boy says to you, are you wearing that? Or that skirt's too short? Or blah, blah, blah? Say goodbye.
Yeah.
That's your first sign that they're going to control you.
Yeah.
Or, and things like that. Or if you can't have friends, like you're 13, if you want to go and have a sleepover with your friends, and, and you, not that she had a boyfriend, but, if you've got a boyfriend, and they, and so I would teach them. But my oldest daughter, I actually would sit and watch, I would watch a lot of, on crime investigation. I would let her sit with me and watch shows about, women who get swept off their feet, and then the man starts to change who they are, and then watch the process of them controlling to the point where it becomes disastrous. And, you know, I'd let her watch them shows with me, and I would talk her through them. And, you know, and then she started to go, oh, you know, is that what happened with you, Mum? And, you know, is this blah, blah, blah? And I'd be like, yep, yep. And so, yeah, that's how I don't sugarcoat anything with my children. I don't make them think that everybody in the world is beautiful and, you know, and sunshine and rainbows.
Yeah.
You know, I allowed them to watch things like that, to learn about the process of going into a narcissistic relationship.
Yeah.
And how it happens. You know, they'll sweep you off your feet, even if they like, you know, they woo you and they're really nice and, you know, and lavish all this, you know, love and affection on you. Like, just be careful and be emotionally intelligent and have your wits about you. And the first time they show that sign of, like, they lie to you and you feel that, and your gut is saying, oh, hang on a minute. And then you notice that things are changing and they're not who they were.
Yep.
That's when you need to, you know, my daughter, her first boyfriend, she had to actually go through that and experience that herself. I saw the patterns of this boyfriend that she had.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know, this is not good. You know, he's, you know, love bombing you, then he's discarding you, then he's love bombing you. And she's like, oh, but I love him. And I'm like, no, you don't. Like, because this is not who he is. Who you met is not who he is.
Yeah.
Like, can you not see this pattern?
Yeah.
You know, it took her a year. I had to sit there and watch her, and now she's just like, oh, wow, Mum, like, why didn't I listen? I said, because I had to let you experience that.
Yeah.
With my observation.
Yeah.
And we would have arguments because I'd be like, this is a red flag, and she'd be like, oh, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, all right. Yeah. But now she's 17 and she hasn't had a boyfriend since, and now she's like, oh, I don't even know what I was thinking, Mum. And I was like, because you're young and you were learning.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that she had that experience at a very young age, because I didn't have that experience until I was in my 20s, but I didn't have that education, you know, that my mum had. You know, my mum remarried. My stepfather was really nice to me. You know, she'd never had an abusive partner. So, you know, I didn't have that experience, and she was who she was. So she didn't teach me things that I believe that I need to teach my daughters, which I wish that I had been taught.
100%. Angela here looks like she doesn't know what love bombing is.
So love bombing is when, like, you know, they're like, oh my God, I love you so much. And, you know, and you might have an argument with them, and then they'll get mad at you and say some nasty things. And then the next day they're like, I'm so sorry. Oh, I love you. Here's some flowers and some chocolates, or, you know, let's just, you know. And so this becomes a pattern of, it's a push-pull. It's this push-pull mechanism. And so, you know, the push is the discarding and the pulling is the love bombing.
Yeah. And the thing to realize, it's a roller coaster. So it's not like, obviously, anybody you get in contact with is going to hurt you sometimes, and they're going to apologize. And
this is where you have that emotional attachment, because they disarm you, and then they make you feel bad for being mad at them for something that they did that they hurt you. And so it becomes a cycle that you are so well in tune with. Yeah. It's like an athlete. You know, I that's the way I looked. I looked like I was a professional athlete of allowing this emotional attachment. I mean, there's, you know, like I say to people, they go, oh, you know, you can be a little bit harsh. And I go, hey, look, you know, I detached myself from my whole family. Yeah. Emotionally detached myself. So you're nothing to me. You have to prove to me that you're worthy of being in my life. Yeah. Within my family. You know, and emotional attachment is so is just another symptom of being with a narcissist. Yeah. Whether it be your parent or whether it be your partner. Because they can surrender you financially, emotionally. Yep. They can, you know, that's where the isolation comes in. And then, you know, you are fully reliant on these people. And so then you have this self-doubt that, oh my God, I can't do this on my own. And then your brain will think of all the good things that were in the relationship instead of all the bad things. But the bad things might be 60% and the good things might be 40.
Yeah.
But you'll always emotionally attach to the 40% of the good things.
Yeah.
Which is where you give them the benefit of the doubt, and then you go back, and then, you know, and that cycle continues.
Yep. 100%. And sometimes you see, like mine, I say mine was 20/80. Like mine was literally 20% good, and I hung on for 13 years. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because you just keep pulling. You're just like, you're waiting for the next love bomb. You're waiting for the next time they're nice to you, not realizing that like the niceness is like just this little bit right here at the very top.
Yeah.
But then the rest of it is all the way, you know, it's like a whole ride down every single time.
And you know, and that's the thing is, even, you know, you could be in a relationship like for mine, my was 7. I knew 4 months in.
Yeah.
This was not good.
Yeah.
And I let it go, and I let it go. And then, you know, at the end of that 7 years, I was just like, how did I get here? How did I let this happen? Like, what? Like, because it was almost like this such a slow but quick but slow process that I didn't even know who Kimberly was anymore.
Yeah.
I didn't know who I was.
100%. 100%. I can totally relate to so much of that, as can Katora right here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It is hard, but you know, I didn't reach out for support. I didn't think anybody understood, and especially because we didn't have Facebook and groups and things like this to validate our situation and go, oh, you know what? I'm going to talk to that person. And it wasn't until I started being online more that I found someone that had been in my shoes, that I then, instead of seeing a therapist, saw this person, and they taught me because they understood where I was and what I'd been through. Yeah. And so then I was like, oh, okay, so this is what I need to do. And I felt relatable. But I didn't have that when I first started, because none of my friends had parents like I had. None of my friends had a relationship like I had.
Yeah.
You know, they would all just watch them to say, why are you with him for? And I'd be like, oh, I don't know. Because I knew. I mean, I knew for such a long time, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
But just kept going.
Yeah. It gets you in that cycle. For sure.
And then before you realize, you're like, oh my God, I've wasted all these years of my life. Yeah. I mean, I look at it now that I had to do that to meet my husband, and then here I am.
Yeah.
But, you know, even meeting my husband and having my children, you know, like my mum sabotaged all that for me. Like, I should have been happy getting married and having my children, and that should have been the best part of my life. She didn't allow me to enjoy that.
Wow.
And so, you know, for the 15 years, like I can't be resentful anymore, because I was resentful that she took all that away from me.
Yeah.
But I can't live like that anymore. I have to just go, you know what? I learned. I might be 51.
Yeah.
But I'm going to not live anymore in that emotional turmoil, or allow her to give her the satisfaction, because the best revenge I can have is be married to my husband, have a fabulous relationship with my children, and live a good life. And I know that I do that because it was only 5 months ago my mum must have been stalking me, and she found my business page, and I didn't realize that she'd messaged my page. And so I found it, and I found this message, and she was just like, you know, and my mum is in her 70s now, and she was like, you're so delusional about your mother, and, you know, blah, blah. And then the next day she messaged me like, oh, you know, I'm so sorry that you had to go through all this trauma. I wish I could have been there for you. And I was just like, what? You were my trauma. Like, you were the whole cause of me not having my father around. You were the whole cause of why I don't have anything to do with you. And but all that did actually was validate to me that, you know, she is sick. She is in denial to what she's done.
Yeah.
And that I'm okay. And I'm okay with it.
I love that. Absolutely. I love that. Can you share some things that you've learned, or some tricks or some techniques or some tools over the years to kind of get you to where you are emotionally? Grasping that joy that you were missing. What are the things that you did?
Well, I had to really, so when when you're in that space and you're mentally and emotionally telling yourself that you're not good enough, and and you're in that pathway of telling yourself all these, if you fail at something, like, yep, see, like, I'm just can't do anything right, and that I had to consciously stop myself from doing that to myself.
Wow. Okay.
I consciously would have to go, you know what? I am a good person. I am great. I am worthy. And because these are beliefs that you take on from these people who want you to believe this way about yourself.
Yeah.
And
100%.
that's how they disarm you. That's how they take away your personality. That's how they take away who you are. And
Yeah.
so I had to consciously make that effort to stop the negative self-talk
Yeah.
and turn it into positive. And this was a thing that I noticed with my daughter, because when she had split up with her boyfriend, she
Yeah.
was posting all this negative stuff. And I was just like, you got to stop. Start posting positive stuff, please. No more negative stuff. And when she started doing that,
Yeah.
she started to feel better.
Absolutely.
But
Absolutely.
it's a conscious thing. You can't, I was like, no one can help me, or I can't do this. That's how I used to think. I can't do this. It's too hard. Until I, said to myself, like, you're just miserable. So what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I just changed the way that I talk to myself about myself.
I love that. Absolutely. So what does that look like exactly? Because a lot of times people think, like, if they're not feeling it immediately, then the way that they feel is truth. So I know what you're saying, but to kind
Yeah.
of, like, really detail it, what does that look like when you're feeling down, you're kind of going down in a slump? What exactly are you saying it internally? Are you writing it? Are you just thinking it? How do you flip? How do you pivot?
Well, I would basically sit there and have a conversation with myself.
Yeah.
So, like, I had really bad anxiety, which was from triggers of, anything that would happen. If I failed at something, I'd just start going into the process of, oh my God, I'm just an idiot, I'm stupid, having all these negative beliefs. I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, and all that. And so that's what I would say to myself, just, okay, stop. And then I'd have this whole conversation, Kimberly, this is not serving the purpose. You've got to get out of this. You've got to stop doing that. And then, and even when I'm telling myself that, I'm worthy, I didn't feel good about it. I still wasn't convinced. But the more I did it, it takes a while.
Yeah.
Because what I learned was, I learned about how my brain worked and how the neurons in my brain, it was like every time I told myself a negative thing, it was like I was just digging a trench in my brain to believe that more and more, and believe it more and more. And so when you have to stop yourself and start thinking positive, it's like you're filling the trench up and you're smoothing it over. And then, then you can come out at the other end. And it can take a long time. It can take, but I mean, once I started to realize what I was doing and how I could change it, it didn't take that long at all.
Yeah.
And that's why I do what I do, because I don't want women to sit there and think and swim in this horrible space for 15, 20 years of their life.
Yep.
Because of some person that treated them wrongly.
Yeah.
That's not their fault.
Yep.
It's, and who they fell in love with is, didn't turn out to be who they wanted and who they dreamed and who, you know, and even the father of their children. You know, and that's the hardest part, is because you fall in love with these people, you have children with these people, and so then you feel like you're doing your kids an injustice by not being with them, and so you do it for them, but in the meantime, you know, they're watching it all and they're absorbing it all and they're learning this pattern. Oh, this is what love must be. This is what love must look like.
Yeah.
And, you know, and that's the hardest part, is saying, no, I can't do this, and I can't allow my children to see this. And, you know, whether it's something going on or whether it's something going on with you, because even when you're not with that person, the aftermath of that, you can still treat yourself badly, and they will watch that as they grow older. Oh, so that's when someone's mean to you, that's how you treat yourself, instead of being strong.
Wow.
And doing it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. How do you decide to show up for your world, like on a daily basis?
My children. And because I was told by my mum, all as a child and a teenager, that I would be a terrible mother all the time. I'd do something at home and, you know, like I wasn't allowed to cook. I had to clean, but I wasn't allowed to cook because if I cooked, I made a mess, and stuff like that. And she would, you know, if I stuffed up something, she'd be like, oh, you know, I couldn't have a puppy. You can't look after a puppy. Why can't I look after a puppy? I'm sure I'm capable. No, you'll be a terrible mother. You'll make a terrible mother. And then when I had my son, she would come into my house and she would, you know, like, for example, I might have just fed him and he's, you know, got his bib on and he's got food all over his face, and she knocks on the door and she comes in and she's like, oh, look at him, he's filthy, you know. And I'd be just like, I just fed him and you just walked in the door. And she would turn this whole thing into how inadequate I was as a mother. And so then she would validate to me that, oh, I must be a terrible mother because she told me all my life that I was going to be a terrible mother.
Yeah.
Like now I'm a great mum, and I know that because, you know, I have great relationships with my kids, and my kids' friends love coming to my house and they love spending time with me, and they all call me Mama Kim, and they all like talk to me about their problems, and, you know, and they respect and listen to my advice, and, you know, and I give them a shoulder to cry on and I support them. And I might say, look, you know, you made a mistake. Don't beat yourself up about it, or, you know, whatever. And so for me, that's how I show up, because I know that all the things that she told me that I was, and all my ex-partners that told me what I was, I am nothing like that. I love
that. That's so awesome.
I always believed I was. Yay.
That's so awesome. I'm so proud of you. That must feel so good.
It does. It does. And, you know, like I said, you know, I've got 3 girls and I can't let them, they have to be strong. I have to teach them how to be strong. And, you know, it's a big, bad world out there.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Do you mind talking a little bit about boundaries? I know that we've gone in and out of it, you know, quite a bit. Yeah. But for those that don't know, you know, what is that word boundaries and why are they so important?
Well, they're important because, you know, it's like if you have a discussion with, you know, you want to go and do something and your partner just like, no, you're not doing that. And you'd be like, well, why? I'm not doing anything wrong. You know, I'm allowed to have friends. I can go out to lunch with this person. Like, what do you think I'm going to be doing? And they will turn it into something completely that it's not. And so, you know, for example, like with my ex, I used to, you know, go and buy lunch at the shop. And if I took too long in his eyes, I was doing something wrong. I was meeting someone, I was cheating, I was doing this, I was doing that. And I never used to say, and if I tried to defend myself, it would be shut down. And so I didn't know how to articulate that strength in communication to go, you know what? You're wrong. I would end up cowering, and I'd be like, okay, I would, just agree, not agree to disagree. I would just agree, just to keep the peace, just to let it go. And with my mom, so she was stepping over the boundaries as far as, communicating with my husband, and with my children, and I would let her do it because I didn't want to upset her. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want any drama. So I said nothing. And then once I started to actually put my foot down and start voicing, no, you're not going to do that, and and things like that, she didn't like that. So it did become a little bit harder, because when you defy someone, especially a narcissist, they start to see that you see that they're full of it, if you know what I mean. Like you're discovering them, and so they don't like that. And so you're challenging them because they like you to be submissive.
Yeah.
I was, submissive. And I guess a boundary is, like, when you're walking around on eggshells, because you're not speaking up.
Yeah.
You're not, because you're frightened of what you're going to lose, the repercussions of what's going to happen. If I stand up for myself, I might get a smack in the face, or I might get punished in some way. So you don't do it.
Yeah.
And so I love teaching boundaries because for me it'd be a series of questions. You can find out a lot about someone even when you first meet them by just the questions that you ask.
Wow.
Is there contradictions? Are they saying one thing but really meaning another?
Wow.
Did they say this but 10 minutes ago they said this? Just by the questions that you ask. And and then you have to have like your values. What do you value the most? What are your opinions about life? What are your wants? What are your needs? And so most of the time we know what they are, but when someone comes in and stomps on them, that's when we know what they are, but we say nothing. And so what I teach is have them almost set in stone. Know exactly, I'm not going to be treated like this. I will not have anyone. When I met my husband, I was like, no man will ever treat me like that again. Yeah. And, and that was a rule. That was, that was a stipulation. And I was going to stand by that.
Yeah. Because
I'd learned the lesson, and, I was going to voice that, and that was the way it was going. And I didn't want to have someone that had children. I mean, I was very lucky. I was 30 when I met my husband. He didn't have children, and neither did I. So I was lucky. But that was one of my boundaries. That was one of my stipulations, of that I was not going to date anyone or have anyone that had children. I was not going to take on that baggage again.
Yeah.
I'd already done it twice, and I wasn't going to do it again.
Yeah.
So, boundaries are very complex, but then you have to know how to assert boundaries even with friends. Is this friend starting to take advantage of me?
Yeah.
I do all these things for my friend. Will my friend do those things for me? And so, it doesn't take long in a friendship to work out whether or not they do or they don't. I mean, I've had friendships for 10 years where then all of a sudden they've changed. I'll be like, hang on a minute. Okay, yep, see you later.
Wow.
And it's very disheartening and it's very hurtful, but I don't allow that to inhibit me as who I am as a person anymore, because I would take it personally. I'd always take it personally, and I don't anymore, because I just think, well, I'm not going to give, and you not reciprocate and give back or communicate with me, or, and boundaries are all about communication.
Yes.
Asking questions, talking, we all have a different perception of the world. We all have different opinions. I mean, I have 6 people in my house, and we all have different opinions of things, and I allow them all to say what they want to say.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, don't step on anybody's boundaries. That's your opinion. You're allowed to have it. That's fine.
Yeah.
I try not to control that. I my kids know my boundaries as far as being a mum and living in my house.
Yeah.
But I also have to respect their boundaries.
Yeah.
And their opinions of the world. And they're individuals.
Yeah.
I might not agree with them, but that's what they are. And so I also used to have a ladder. So I'd have a ladder of people. Okay, well, I'm a little bit sus of you here. And then I'd have someone who's up here who's highly respectful of me, who, reciprocates what I do for them. But then they might do something that, out of the blue that I think, oh, okay. So then I'll just bring them down a little bit to this part of the ladder. And then they have to earn that, way up the ladder.
Yeah.
And boundaries are like not the same for everybody. So that's where my ladder comes in. It's like, well, okay, so in the time and the moment that something happens, if you need to put a boundary in, who is it? What are they doing that's upsetting you?
Yeah.
How can you articulate or communicate that? And what is it that, do you want from that person?
Exactly.
And so I try to break it all down and do it in a process where they can go, right, well, when my husband says this to me, I'm not going to put up with blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And when my friend does this to me, I'm not going to say yes just to please them because, they want me to take them to the shop every day. And then, well, I've got something that I have to do, but I have to give up that to do that for them. And so you go through the people and you know who the people are. Yeah. You know who the people are that you have to set boundaries with.
Yeah.
But if you break it all down, and it's all about communication, questioning yourself, asking yourself the questions, what is the answer to that question, and then communicating that with that person. And if they don't like what you've said, that's on them, because your self-worth comes by allowing how you will allow them to treat you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So obviously you have an incredible amount of experience in this field. What are some plans that you have, as far as business wise and empowering women, and, where's your mind going as far as, upcoming things for your clients and the people that you work with?
So I have like one-on-one coaching where I call it self-love by design. So that could be anywhere between, debunking beliefs and working through the beliefs that you have about yourself, because everybody's different. There's no textbook for self-love. And I'm a believer that there's a difference between self-love and self-care. I believe self-care is, that's where you go for walks, and that's where you do your hair and your makeup to feel good, and you pamper yourself and you do things like that. But to me, self-love is brain training. It is emotional training. It is becoming emotionally intelligent to be able to control your emotions, because that's self-love, because that's looking after your emotional and mental well-being.
Yep.
And so, depending on the client, depending on where they're at and what they need, it's a design. It's self-love by design for them. What do they need? What are they looking for? How can I help them achieve what they want to achieve? How can I help them move through this? Because what might work for you might not work for someone else. For me, I couldn't meditate because I couldn't stop all the monkeys enough in my head to shut up and just be hushed. I don't do journaling because that's not me. So those things didn't work for me, but they may work for, like, my 13-year-old. She's just started journaling, and that's great. That works for her. She enjoys doing that. And so that's where I created the self-love by design, that it's all about you, and it's all about what you need and how I can help you get through that. And with boundaries, I have a workshop called Boundaries by Design, because, again, boundaries are designed for individual people, for individual people. Mm-hmm. So, one person might have just that one person in their life, which could be their partner, because they're isolated from everybody. How can they assert boundaries with that person? How can they start small and work their way up? Because you can't just go in charging like a bull, because, you know, you might own a house together and you've got things, and, you know, they may not even be able to leave their partner. So they have to learn a way to be able to find a little bit of their self-worth and cohabitate in a way that they feel good about it, or better about it, until they can get to that point where they can feel confident to leave or change, or, you know, or plan. You know, some of my clients, I help them plan. Okay, so, you know, how can we plan to get you where you want to go? And so, yeah, on the 30th of August, for an hour a day for a week, I've got a Boundaries by Design workshop. So that'll be a live workshop where I will work with whoever comes, and we just go through, you know, the emotions that boundaries, why you don't have boundaries, what emotions do you feel? You know, is it fear? Is it being, you know, the repercussions of voicing, you know, what sort of emotions do you need to get rid of to be able to start asserting boundaries, and then breaking down the process of what boundaries are.
Beautiful. Beautiful. I love that your 13-year-old is journaling.
I know, it was so cute, because she's bought this, because it was their birthday last week, and so she bought all this stationery stuff, because she's very creative. She's very like me. She loves drawing and stuff like that. She's like, oh, Mum, look at my journal. She's got all these daisies, and she's like, now this is for, you know, when I clean my teeth, and this is for like how I feel. And she drew, I don't even know how she come up with half this stuff, but, you know, she's got this flower, and she's got her moods, and, you know, mood 1, 2, 3, 4, how she's feeling each day. And and it's really good for her, because she was actually born with anxiety. She actually had anxiety as a baby. And she I've worked with her so closely with her. You know, my twins are like chalk and cheese. One, she doesn't care what anybody thinks, and my other one cares what everybody thinks.
Wow.
And so we work a little bit more with the one that cares about what everybody thinks. And every day when she gets in my car and I pick her up from school, she'll be like, oh, so-and-so, you know, said this to me. And I'm like, she did that because she wants you to feel bad. She does that because you're a better drawer than her. Don't let her make you feel bad, because, you know. And then she goes, oh, you know, she might have taken my pencil and she doesn't give it back. Don't lend her your stuff, Rebel. Just stop. Yeah. And she's such a sweetie. But yeah, she's created this whole journal that she's done, and I didn't tell her to do it. She's just decided that, you know, that's what she's going to do.
Me too. I do. So I started my journal when I was 12, and I have 20.
I saw that. And you read from your journals.
I read every Monday. Yep. Every Monday for an hour. I read in chronological order, and I love it. Like, I am so glad that I did it, because what's interesting is I'm actually learning how young I was when a lot of my thought processes were starting. I could see it, like
the pattern there. Yeah.
So it's helping me. It's like almost like a therapy for me. Yeah,
absolutely. I wish I had done the same thing.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I can think back and I think, oh my God, like, what was I thinking then? But I have it actually written down to be able to read it, to go, like, what was I thinking? Like,
yeah.
Wow, how immature was I? Or how, you know, or you can notice the day that, you know, you had this epiphany of something. Oh, I think that's fabulous.
Yeah. So I always, in the beginning of it, I always encourage, I'm like, if you're a mother of a daughter, or anybody, but like, daughters do it. Like, I think girls do it. I think guys, it's weird. But encourage them to write in a journal, because it is great therapy. I wrote everything in my journal, like everything.
Yeah.
So it's great therapy to be able to talk things out and write things out. So I love that. That's so cool.
I guess I didn't do it because, now that you've just like said all that, and thinking back to my childhood, is because I was not allowed to have anything that was personal. My mum used to go through my room. I was not allowed to have anything personal. Like, she would literally go through my room when I wasn't there.
Yeah.
And if she found something that she wasn't happy, if I had a journal, she would have sat there and read it. Like, I was not allowed to have anything that was just for me.
Wow.
And so that's probably why I never did that sort of stuff, because I knew that she would find out and I wouldn't want her to read what I was writing.
Yeah. I actually joke about that. I'm like, because my mom is the one that encouraged me to do it. She used to buy my journals for me, like little cute cats and dogs and like birds or whatever. And I joke about that. Like, I wonder if my mom did this on purpose so she could see, my thought process. So while I'm reading, sometimes I'm like, oh my God, I hope my mom didn't read that. Because there's times when I was literally like, oh, I hate my whole family. Or like, I was just, that's the mood that I was in. I was just angry that day, or my sister sucks or whatever.
Yeah.
But those are the things that, I can't even imagine if I didn't have my voice, which I'm an empath. I didn't have a voice growing up. But then if I also didn't journal, I don't even know what I would have done. Like, who do you talk to about all your feelings and all the things,
Yeah.
So I'm so grateful that she made me do that. Whether she read it or not, I was never reprimanded for anything that I wrote that I know of. Maybe like silently, she like made me do the dishes like 4 days in a row or something. And I just didn't calculate it in my head as punishment. Like, who knows? But I'm very grateful that she had me do that. So that's cool.
Yeah, I think it's fabulous.
I hope she continues it. That's awesome.
Because I've seen you do that. And then when my daughter only came down, a couple of days ago, she's like, I'm going to do a journal. I was like, oh, yes, do it. And then make sure you keep them all. So, when you're older, you'll look back on it. And, it's like I keep all my kids' stuff from when they were in kindergarten and, not necessarily everything that they've done in school, but I've kept a lot of it, so that when they're older, they can look back. Now, my mum never did that for me, so I've got no idea,
Wow.
And so I've kept. So that's I guess that's a little bit like my journaling, but that's for them, so that when they're older, they'll be like, oh my God. And even now, we've moved houses, and I found a box of their stuff, and I'll say to my 17-year-old daughter, oh, look what you wrote to me. Like, oh my God, how embarrassing.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's so great. That's so great. Very cool.
Yeah.
So I so appreciate you coming on here with me. This has been so enlightening and so informative and full of life and feeling. I appreciate you taking the time. One of the things that I would love to do is to kind of get your advice. If a woman right now is listening and she's struggling in a relationship that's toxic, like just abusive, and she's feeling all the things and she knows all the things, she's starting to, what would be your advice to her? What would you say to her right now?
Reach out to someone who has been in your shoes and has made it through, and talk to them. And I think a lot of the things that stops women doing that is, above all, is the shame. Is the shame that we allowed that to happen to ourselves. Even with my mum, I used to have this shame, an embarrassment. How could I but it wasn't in my control. I didn't know any better. I didn't know what was happening, in my abusive relationships. I didn't know. And then I felt so shameful. I was like, oh my God, like, how did I allow this person to totally consume my whole being, to the point where, like, they've just sucked the life out of me and I don't even know who I am anymore. Don't be afraid to ask for help. Yeah. And not asking for help is actually a trauma response. It's a trauma response by not asking for help, because we think, oh no, I can handle it. I'll just keep it to myself. I used to have, when I'd go shopping with my children, I actually went for about 3 years where I wouldn't leave my house, because I felt like if I left my house, I used to order my shopping online and get it delivered to my house. And because I didn't want to leave my house, because I felt like if I left my house, people could see like this beacon on my head about this shame that I carried for
Wow.
whatever. And but I didn't know anyone, and there wasn't any resources there like there are now to ask for help or to just talk to someone. You know, a lot of my clients, I talk to them before I work with them. You know, I get to know them and I connect with them, and I try and understand them, and, you know, do they understand me? And, you know, can I help them? Do they want to help? Do they want to help themselves? And, you know, and that's the part, is until you get to that point where you are going to accept help, nothing's going to change, because you can't, you know, we can spend so long asking for help with therapy. That's what I did. I was like asking for help with therapy, but I wasn't getting the help that I yearned and that I needed. It was just, I was missing something. And that's because I hadn't been in my shoes, and, you know, they'd gone to uni and learned all this stuff. And so it wasn't until I found not really a life coach, but a trauma coach, who taught me what I know, and to accept my past and not to feel the shame, because, you know, that's not who I am, and that's not what I would have carried that on and then made my kids feel like they should be like, you know, because it's a cycle that you continue. You know, and there's proven facts that, you know, when you, especially as a child born into, you know, say toxicity and narcissism, it's actually generations in your genes.
Yeah.
And I noticed that because now that I've learned it, I like my grandmother, and my grandmother was an alcoholic, and, you know, and didn't treat herself emotionally well. Obviously, neither did my mum. My mum was not an alcoholic. She did not drink alcohol. She did not smoke cigarettes. My grandmother, on the other hand, did. So then I identified myself that, I have an addictive personality because I drank and I smoked and I did all those things. And so, you know, I could look back into the past and go, right, well, this is how they, you know, my grandmother was in an abusive relationship with my grandfather because he was just a drunken, racist, bigoted old man. And so I saw the pattern. But it wasn't until I was in my 30s and I was like, oh, God, I wish I had known this like so much earlier.
Yeah.
But it's okay that I didn't,
Yeah.
as long as I learned. But you've got to, you know, the thing is people can cry out for help, but they're not really ready yet. They're not there.
Yeah.
They have to be ready. They have to actually be at the end of their tether to go, you know what, I really need to do something to change. I really do need help.
Yeah.
And it's when I say, you know, ask for help.
Yeah.
Talk to someone, ask them questions, and then do the work. Because they say knowledge is power, but I don't believe knowledge is power unless you put it into action. Because you can know a lot of stuff. I knew a lot about self-development, and I know I need to do this. You know, it's like if you're an alcoholic, I know I need to stop drinking, but you keep doing it anyway.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you've got to learn, you've got to get to that point where you know all this stuff, but then you have to actually take action. And that all that is stepping out that comfort zone. Like I did with my joy and finding my happiness, I had to tell myself, stop. Of course you enjoy, you know, of course you deserve to be happy. So I had to force myself to get up and play with my kids and smile and laugh and be carefree. You know, it's like I would always think if I went on a holiday, I'd be so anxious because I don't know what it's like to relax because I'm so highly strung all the time.
Yeah.
Until you accept the fact that, you know, okay, I got to stop that. And how can I change it? What can I do? And then start doing little baby steps.
Exactly.
Because you can look up at the mountain and know that's where you want to climb. But if you don't look just forward one step at a time, you'll never get there. You'll never know what you can achieve.
Yeah.
So always ask for help, but ask the right person.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Your friends aren't always the right person.
No, because they'll go, oh, you know, like they'll give you the wrong advice.
Yeah.
And
or they'll just say, just leave. Like it's that easy.
Yeah. Or they'll give you a cuddle and they'll say, you'll be right.
Yeah.
And you might feel good in that moment. Oh, okay, yeah, a little bit of relief, but that's not what you need. Yeah. Sometimes, you know, I needed a bit of tough love. I needed someone to shake me up and go, Kimberly, you need to stop talking to yourself this way. You need to start doing this. You need to, it's not your fault. Stop. Keep analyzing or trying to understand that other person, because you'll never understand. It's like, watching a TV show about a psychopath, and you never understand why people do what they do. You're like, why do people do that? You could sit there for 10 years trying to work out why they do that, and you'll never have the answer. Exactly. But if you understand why do I do that? Mm-hmm. It's so much easier to understand yourself than to worry about other people, because especially women, we want to fix people. We want to make men better, and we want to help them, because we don't want to think that we could fail at that. Yeah. And I think that's a lot of times where women stay around in those sorts of relationships, because we want to fix them, we want to make them better, but all they're doing is making us worse.
Exactly. Couldn't have said it better myself. Absolutely. So for those of us that are listening now live or on the replay, where can people find you? Where are you?
Okay, so I'm just in the process of doing a website, but I have my business page is Self Love by Design. You can look me up there. You can friend request me, so you can get to know me as a person. And I also have a group called Self Love by Design as well. So very easy, very simple. Type it up. My profile picture is the same picture. But yeah, I love it when people want to friend request me, and I get to know them, and they get to know me, and and I can connect them on a more of a personal level, because that's where you can learn and accept help. Because if it's too clinical and there's no connection there, then there's nothing. So I love it when people want to send me a friend request and join my group, and just to get to know me, and I can get to know them and help them. And I have those relationships with my clients. We become friends. And I can offer so much more support that way.
I love that. And if you could, once we're done with this, in the comment section, put, a couple of those links in so people can just
easily. Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll put my boundary workshop link in there, and sign up and come and have a chat with me. And I would love that.
Beautiful. I love that. Any closing words before I close up here?
Just thank you for letting me be here and telling my story. And this is what people don't realize is, it's actually very therapeutic to be able to tell your story without emotion and without, it's very empowering, because I could never tell my story without crying. And I can tell my story without feeling shame, without feeling like I'm a bad person, because, everybody has a story. Everybody has a story. And most of the time, if you're suffering depression and anxiety, the symptoms are all the same. How you feel about yourself is the same. It's just that your story is different to mine. My story is different to someone else's. But how we feel and how we heal can be the same process.
100%. I totally agree with that. Well, thank you so much. I know it's the next day now, right?
Yes, 1 o'clock in the morning. That's okay.
Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us here. I appreciated all the time, all the detail. I got so much out of it. So I thank you. And I really do know that the women who were watching and the women who are going to be watching on replay will really get inspired and really feel some power from you. So I really appreciate you, taking some time out of your night to sit with us.
You're very welcome.
Of course. Okay. So thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform with Kimberly that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. Have an amazing day. Much love.